You ever seen something so darn good that you just knew everybody would try to copy it? Today, we ain't talking about your run-of-the-mill shooting irons. No way. We're gonna dive into the history books and pull out some truly legendary pieces of hardware. Guns that were so good they got copied by everybody else. Let's get into it. We're gonna start right off by shining a spotlight on the right arm of the free world, the FNFAL. This piece of iron was invented in Belgium by renowned arms designer Dragonov SVD. You like that accent? I'm working on it. Anyways, working for the legendary company Fabrique Nationale FN Herstal. So why was the FNFAL such a celebrated piece of iron? Well, for starters, it was chambered in the powerful 7.62 by 51mm NATO cartridge. That's a full-sized rifle round, mind you, with enough punch to knock a grizzly bear out of a tree. The FAL was known for its rugged reliability as well. And what I mean by that is that you could drag it through mud, sand, and worse, and that Belgian beauty would still spit lead when you needed it to. It had an adjustable gas system, which means you could tune it to work in all sorts of nasty conditions or with different kinds of ammo like a finely tuned banjo. It was robust, dependable, and easy enough for a soldier to maintain in the field. Now, how did this fine piece of engineering get to be so popular? Well, after World War II, when the world was trying to figure out what kind of rifle all the good guys should carry, the FAL was right there at the forefront. FN designed it to be the standard rifle for the newly formed NATO alliance. It got adopted by over 90 different countries around the globe. And it wasn't just NATO nations neither. Now, when we talk about who copied the FAL, it's a bit more widespread adoption and license production than outright reverse engineering, because FN was mighty good at selling their design. The United Kingdom called its version the L1A1, self-loading rifle or SLR. They stuck with a semi-auto version, figuring an automatic rifle fire was mostly a waste of good ammo, but it was still a powerful and highly reliable rifle. The Canadians made their own too, the C1A1, very similar to the British L1A1 in 1955. A few years later, Brazil joined the wagon with their Imbel FAL in 1964, and Australia and New Zealand also produced the L1A1, using it as their primary battle rifle for decades. Even countries like India, South Africa, and Argentina produced their own variants of the FAL under license. But listen, people, if the FNFAL was the right arm of the free world, then the AK-47 was the other arm, no pun intended. After World War II, a fellow named Mikhail Kalashnikov, working for the Soviets, he put his head together and designed this rifle. He's a simple man, they say, and he designed a simple gun, which ended up being its greatest strength. The first real working model of the Automat Kalashnikova model in 1947, aka the AK-47, was officially adopted by the Soviet Army in 1949. Now, why did this rifle get so popular, you ask? Well, it's simple. It's tougher than an old boot and more reliable than the Sunrise. This gun was designed with wide tolerances. What that means is that there's plenty of space between the moving parts. It's got very few moving parts too, making it easy to clean and even easier to operate. And it fired the 7.62 by 39mm cartridge, which is a good solid round. Powerful enough to get the job done, but still controllable recoil. The whole thing was built for mass production, even in factories that weren't exactly state-of-the-art, making it cheap and plentiful. And it was practically indestructible. But them Soviets didn't just keep the AK-47 to themselves, they started handing them out like free candy at a parade. First, it went to all the Warsaw Pact nations, East Germany, Poland, Romania, Hungary, Bulgaria, and then the Soviets started shipping them off to communist allies. Not to mention revolutionary groups and proxy forces all over the globe during the Cold War. Now, when you talk about who copied the AK-47, well, it's probably easier to ask yourself, who didn't? This gun is so simple and effective that pretty much every communist or allied nation either got the rights to make it themselves, aka licensed production, or just plain reverse engineered it and started making their own versions. China made zillions of them as the Type 56. East Germany had their MPI-KM, and Poland made the KBK-AK. Romania had the PMMD 6365, and Hungary made the AMD 65 and the AKM 63. Then you got North Korea, who produced the Type 58 and Type 68. Now, Yugoslavia, now Serbia, made the Zastava M70 series, which were mighty fine rifles themselves, and even Egypt made them as the Mahdi, that's 2 A's. The list goes on and on and on. If there's one handgun that's more American than apple pie and a 4th of July fireworks show, it's the legendary M1911 pistol. This bad boy is the brainchild of John Moses Browning. You know the name, that's a go to gunsmithing right there. He designed the M1911 right here in the US in the early 20th century, specifically for the US military. They were having a mighty tough time with some fierce rebels in the Philippines called the Moro, and their existing sidearms just weren't enough. So the military put out a call for a new pistol that could deliver a knockout punch, and thus, in 1911, the M1911, along with its famous 45 ACP cartridge, was officially adopted. It became popular mostly thanks to that big old 45 ACP round. Folks started calling it the two-shot stopper because it delivered such a wallop. The idea was that if you hit something with a 45, it generally stopped moving pretty quick. Beyond the power, though, the M1911 was famous for its reliability. It was built like a tank, easy to field strip, and could take a licking and keep on ticking, even in the mud and grit of wartime. Shooters loved the ergonomics. It just felt natural in the hand, pointing like a finger. When John Moses Browning designed that pistol and Colt started making it, they held the patents on its specific design features and mechanisms. The key patents were issued around at the time of its adoption, and after a good while, those fundamental patents had expired. This meant that any gun manufacturer in the world, without having to pay a dime in licensing fees to Colt or getting their permission, could legally start making their own M1911 pistols or variants of them. And would you guess it, that's exactly what happened. Folks all over the place from Argentina and beyond made faithful licensed copies like the Sistema Colt, Norway built their unique Kongsberg Colt, and even Spanish companies like Llama and Astra made their own spin on design, making versions that looked or operated pretty similarly. And even today, modern makers like Kimber with their fancy models and Rock Island Armory and Taurus with their more affordable options are still churning out this timeless classic. Now we've got the CZ75, invented by František and Josef Kolke, working for the famed Česká zbrojovka. Listen, it's something in Czechoslovakia. That's exactly why I butchered the name, but my goodness. The CZ75 was first unveiled in 1975, and get this, it wasn't even designed for their own military at first. It was built primarily to export to Western countries looking to earn some hard currency. Folks say it fits like a glove, feeling natural and comfortable in almost any hand. But the real genius is in its slide-in frame design. Another big deal was its unique combination of being a double-action, single-action DASA pistol, but also having a manual safety that allowed it to be carried cocked and locked like a 1911. Unlike most pistols where the slide rides over the frame rails, the CZ75 slide actually rides inside the frame. This allows for tighter tolerances, which means better accuracy, and also lowers the bore axis, helping you to reduce muzzle flip when you're shooting. The secret ingredient to the CZ75's incredible spread and popularity was the fact that, for all intents and purposes, it had no effective international patent protection. So, as you might have guessed, a whole heap of companies either made very similar pistols or outright clones. And Foglio from Italy was probably the most famous, churning out a whole family of CZ75 clones known as the Witness pistols that were hugely popular in competition. The Israel Weapon Industries made the Jericho 941, famously known as the Baby Eagle, a direct descendant of the CZ75 design. You're going to find these inspired designs from various manufacturers in Turkey, like Canik, and other Eastern European nations, all trying to capture the essence of the original Czech masterpiece, Pioneered. But next, let's talk about a little firecracker that ain't got no qualms about packing a big old punch in a small package. The mighty Uzi from Israel. Yes, that Uzi. For a submachine gun that spits out 9mm bullets, this thing was mighty small, making it easy to handle in tight spaces, conceal under a jacket, or maybe even stash in a briefcase. But let's be real here. Its real genius was its simplicity and legendary reliability. It uses a system of what's called open bolt, which means fewer moving parts in the initial firing sequence. And that means it's less sensitive to dirt, dust, and grime. Yeah, kind of wish my grandma had that. Anyways, the Uzi got famous because it was a little genius firecracker. Its telescoping bolt design made it mighty compact, perfect for hiding and fighting in tight spots. That same design, along with its weight, made it surprisingly recoil balanced, so you could keep it on target even when letting loose a whole heap of 9mm rounds. And then, like a lead cherry on top, you add in its ultra-reliable nature. It'd run through mud and dust without a hitch, and the fact that it was cheap to make from simple parts, my friend, you got yourself a legendary firearm. That little Uzi got spread across the globe like wildfire because Israel needed to sell them for cash, making it a favorite for security forces and special ops worldwide. And then some folks like FN Herstal paid good money to build them under license, while others just plain copied or adapted the design illegally, because guess what? It's simple and effective, scattering that tough-as-nails submachine gun into just about every corner of the planet, even showing up in Hollywood movies. Zimbabwe, Rhodesia back then even developed their own localized version called the LDP, clearly influenced by the Uzi. Countries like South Africa produced some that deviated a little bit, like the BXP and the Thompson 77, clearly taking cues from the Uzi's compact, open-bolt philosophy. And then even China produced a plain and simple unlicensed copy of the Uzi Model B called the M320. Always gotta have a knockoff. Next up, we got the Remington 870. Now, this became a hot ticket that folks just had to copy because of its simplicity and reliability. This shotgun's built like a brick outhouse with a solid steel receiver, pump action mechanism straightforward with very few fiddly bits to break, and it's famous for eating just about any kind of 12-gauge shell you feed it. But it wasn't just tough, it was also incredibly versatile. You could use a Remington 870 for just about anything. Hunters loved it for birds and deer, sports shooters used it for clays, law enforcement and military relied on it for breaching and close-quarters combat, and regular folks like me bought it for home defense. Its modular design meant that you could easily swap out barrels, stocks, and magazine extensions to fit any job, making it a true jack-of-all-trades. And would you believe it, this shotgun sold like hotcakes. Remington has moved over 11 million of these shotguns since it first came out in 1950. Once the original part patents expired, the design was essentially open for picket. Global manufacturers, seeing that massive design for a reliable, versatile pump-action shotgun, just line right up to clone the design. And tons of big names clone this shotgun, including Norinco from China, as they're famous for making their own versions of just about anything that works. See, their HP91, also known as the Norinco 982, is a direct, often very affordable clone of the Remington 870. Turkish companies like Pardus and Armsan produced pump-action shotguns that were either heavily inspired or directly cloned the 870's internal mechanisms. Even over in Russia, where they got their own long history of tough firearms, they could not help but take cues from the 870, producing their own derivative called the Baikal MP133. Folks, in the 1930s, most pistols held 7, maybe 8 rounds, but the high-power Browning, that baby came packing a revolutionary 13-round double-stacked magazine in 9mm. That was a whole heap of firepower for a handgun back then, practically double what most folks carried. Despite that high capacity, its ergonomics were just, oh baby, smooth as butter, feeling mighty natural in the hand like it was born there. The combination of serious firepower and comfortable grip made it an instant favorite for military units around the globe. See, originally FN, which owned the design, licensed it out far and wide before World War II, but then the war came, and the Germans occupied Belgium, making FN produce high powers for the Axis. Meanwhile, the original plans made their way to Canada, where Inglis started making them for the Allies. After the war, and once those original patents ran out, the floodgates opened even wider. Suddenly, countries could copy that brilliant design freely, and boy, did they ever. During World War II, Canada's Inglis stepped up to churn them out for the Allied forces, and later on, Argentina's FM made their own mighty fine, faithful versions for decades. Nowadays, you still got companies like Hungary's FEG with their own takes, and Turkey's TSAS making affordable, loyal reproductions like the MCP-35, just proving that Browning high powers, it's got timeless appeal, man. Listen, the Soviets, they figured out they didn't just need bolt-action snipers hiding in the bush, they needed a designated marksman rifle, or DMR. A rifle that could be issued to a regular infantry squad member and let him reach out beyond the range of an AK-47 and still deliver rapid, accurate follow-up shots. And that's where Yevgeny's Dragonov's genius came in. The SVD was the first battle-proven semi-automatic marksman rifle built specifically for that role. It came paired with its famous PSO-1 scope, which wasn't just a piece of glass. It had a built-in rangefinder and even an active infrared detector, all designed to work perfectly with that rifle. This combo allowed a trained marksman to reliably hit targets out to 800 meters or 875 freedom units. It fired the powerful 7.62 by 54mm cartridge, a big, heavy round that packed a punch and stayed true over long distances. Plus, like most Soviet designs, it was built pretty rugged. And distributing their golden firearm, the Soviet Union had a mighty clear strategy during the Cold War. They didn't just sell their best stuff. They often distributed blueprints and manufacturing licenses to their closest allies and client states. Listen, buddy, you weren't just getting rifles shipped to you, you were getting the instructions to build them yourself right there in your own factories. Listen, give a man a fish, and he'll eat for a day. Teach a man to make a Dragonov, and he's gonna shoot a lot of fish. With those blueprints posted to every country, they led to some mighty fine direct copies. China's NDM-86 was a faithful clone, even made for export in different calibers. Down in the Middle East, though, Iran produced their own Nakshir 3. And even Saddam Hussein's Iraq got in on the action with their distinctive Al-Qaeda. Here's another big one for you. We've got the infamous Tommy gun, straight up icon that tore through the Prohibition era with gangsters and marched off to war with Allied soldiers. It was so darn good and famous that its design just kept on spreading faster than a tall tale at a barbershop. Its distinctive look and vertical foregrip just screamed power, especially with the 45 ACP round. It was initially built with top-notch machined steel parts, making it mighty durable, though heavy as a hog on ice. It became iconic, but not just for its military use, but for its infamous role in the hands of gangsters during the Prohibition era. A true dual legend of the underworld and the battlefield alike. The Thompson started off mighty expensive. Not even the military jumped on it at first. But when World War II hit, Uncle Sam needed to arm his boys fast, and millions of Thompsons were turned out for the U.S. and its allied buddies, those being Britain and the Commonwealth troops. After the war, when millions of these guns were no longer needed, they ended up being sold as military surplus. And this flooded the global market, putting the Thompson and its simple, robust design into hands of folks and forces all over the world. Them boys down in Argentina made their own simpler stamped metal versions like the PAM 1 and 2, keeping that powerful 45 ACP spirit alive. Over in the Philippines, folks were so impressed they even whipped up their own home-built copies in backyard workshops, showing how basic and effective the design was. And while Italy's MAB-38 wasn't a direct copy, it certainly followed Thompson's lead in being a powerful, full-size submachine gun. Now, we've got a gun that was never chosen first, but still ended up doing numbers, and that's the Armalite AR-18. So, what made the AR-18 such a smart piece of engineering, even if it didn't get all the glory? Well, Armalite, the same folks who brought you the M16, designed the AR-18 as a cheaper, simpler alternative to that gun. So the M16 used a direct impingement gas system, which was mighty precise, but tended to get dirtier inside. The AR-18, though, used a piston-driven system, which meant it ran a whole lot cleaner and cooler. But the real genius for its time was the construction. It used stamped steel parts instead of the M16's more expensive forged aluminum, or aluminum for us US people out there. This meant that it could be built cheaper and faster in just about any factory, even one without all that fancy high-tech machinery. And to top it off, it came with a folding stock, making it compact for paratroopers or folks who needed a rifle they could stash real easy. Now, despite all its cleverness, the AR-18 never did see widespread adoption by major armies. It lost out to the M16 for the U.S. military contract, and it just meant it got overshadowed. So it didn't spread by being issued to millions of soldiers like the AK-47 or even the M16. See, instead, the AR-18 spread its influence in a different way because its design became a teacher. You can see the AR-18's DNA in some mighty important rifles. Japan's Hoa Type 89 is a clear descendant, borrowing that piston design. And even the UK's SA-80, despite looking completely different, uses an internal operating system directly derived from the AR-18. Shoot, even Singapore's SAR-80 took heavy inspiration, so while it didn't get all the spotlight, the AR-18's clever design proved timeless, influencing a whole family of effective rifles all around the globe. Unsung hero, that one. But speaking of the M16, that gun was a true revolution, changing a lot more than just lives. Made by old Eugene Stoner, his design was modular for the get-go, meaning you could swap out barrels, stocks, and accessories quicker than a wink. But the real genius? Well, that was a shift to the smaller, faster 5.56 NATO cartridge. That meant low recoil, letting soldiers put more bullets on target quicker, and they could carry a whole lot more ammo without breaking their backs. The lightweight, accurate, low recoil combo literally reshaped infantry tactics, pushing away from the slow, heavy rifles to faster, more maneuverable firepower. Once the U.S. military adopted the M16, its spread was guaranteed. Uncle Sam, he started exporting them extensively to allies all over the world, making it a cornerstone of NATO standardization and a common sight in conflicts everywhere. On top of that, the civilian market exploded with AR-15 clones, making it one of the most recognizable and widely available gun platforms on the planet. Well, now that M16 design was so revolutionary, everybody wanted a piece of it. Up in Canada, Diamaco built their own mighty fine C7, C8 rifles directly under license, making them even better than the originals. Over in Taiwan, they cooked up their own rugged T91. Folks, this shows exactly how that core design can be adapted for local needs. And all across Europe and Asia, countless manufacturers churned out their own AR clones and derivatives. The Baretta 92 was a real showstopper. Right off the bat, it came packing an impressive 15-round capacity in 9mm, but its real secret sauce was its unique open slide design. See, That big cutout on the slide where the barrel looks like it's exposed? Yeah, it wasn't just for looks. It was made sure that spent casings cleared out easily, practically eliminating stovepipes. And it helped keep things cool. This made it incredibly reliable even when it got dirty, and then the biggest feather in its cap, the US military adopted it as the M9 in the 1980s. See, right after that, Baretta itself licensed its production to other countries. I mean, it was so popular and the design eventually became so widely understood that other manufacturers started reverse engineering their own versions. Down in Brazil, Taurus got a jump start by inheriting a Baretta factory, turning out their own slightly different but mighty fine PT-92s. Over in Turkey, companies like Girsan and Canik hopped on the bandwagon, making a whole heap of their own Baretta-inspired pistols that, well, they offered a real bang for your buck. And then in Pakistan, their POF made its M9 variants for military and for export, just showing how that Italian beauty's design truly became a worldwide sensation. Every Soviet workhorse I've come across tells me that these people, they know their iron. The Tokarev TT-33 was designed by old Fedor Tokarev to be a dead simple gun. It uses a modified version of the John Moses Browning short recoil system, but stripped down to its bare essentials, making it easy to manufacture in huge numbers and still making it tough as nails. And then there's that hot 7.62 by 25mm cartridge it spits out. That round is fast, it's flat shooting, and it's known for its ability to punch through light armor or maybe even helmets. It was a true rugged Soviet pistol, designed to work reliably in their own frozen steppes. Once it became the standard Soviet pistol in the 1930s, they didn't just keep it to themselves. They engaged in heavy exports to all their allies and client states, especially after World War II. But more than just shipping guns, Moscow also distributed blueprints and manufacturing rights to friendly nations across the socialist bloc. That Tokarev TT-33 design was so simple and tough, it spread like wildfire among Soviet allies. China's Type 54 became the most famous clone, turned out in massive numbers and seen all over Asia. Down in Yugoslavia, they made their own fine M57, often with a longer grip and more rounds. And the Poles were quick to build a faithful WZ-33 under license, and the rest was history. Listen, let me tell you something. The first of a kind always has the most eyes on it. The Mauser C96 was one of the very first semi-automatic pistols ever to hit the scene. Well, it popped up in the late 1800s looking like something from the future. I mean, it was one of the first pistols to load itself automatically, showing folks what was possible beyond revolvers. And that broom handle grip, while it might look a little funny to some, it was mighty distinctive. But the real kicker here is how it was built like a tank. It shot a fast 7.63 by 25mm Mauser cartridge, had a fixed 10-round magazine that could even attach to a wooden holster and turn it into a carbine, fancy. And this made it surprisingly accurate out to a pretty good distance. The Mauser was mighty keen on exporting it early and often. Officers, adventurers, and even revolutionaries all around the world bought them and loving their power and range. It showed up in conflicts from the Boer Wars to World War I, where the Germans used a special Red 9 version chambered in 9mm. But the real story of its spread and its ultimate copying lies in China. Its country was going through a heap of civil wars and warlord eras, and they imported so many C96s that they became obsessed with them, leading them to intensive reverse engineering right there in Chinese factories. They cooked up the unique Shaanxi Type 17, an oversized broom handle chambered in 45 ACP to match their Thompson ammo. And don't get me started on Spain and the other European makers churning out their own versions, often with wild selective fire capabilities for some full auto fun. And much later, China brought back the design concept with their own Type 80 machine pistol. I mean, have you ever seen a country so obsessed with one piece of iron? The H&K G3 was a German workhorse with an unbeatable roller-delayed blowback mechanism. Now that sounds complicated, but what it means is a super simple, incredibly reliable system that handles a powerful 7.62 NATO cartridge like a dream. It didn't need a complex gas system, it just used clever physics to cycle smoothly, making it battle-tested in every dusty, muddy, and hot corner of the world. Germany and Heckler & Koch licensed its production to a whole heap of NATO and allied nations, and so factories started churning out their own G3s from Europe to Africa to Asia, solidifying its place as a global standard. Over in Turkey, MKE started churning out licensed G3s for their own soldiers, and they exported that for decades. Then in Iran, their DO also became a big licensed producer, keeping that rugged design as core part of their arsenal. Then Pakistan followed suit. Pakistan Ordnance Factory started making their own fine G3s for a good long while, serving their own military. Bunch of copycats. Listen, if there's one pistol that's taken over the world like a country music song on repeat, it's the magnificent Glock 19. When it showed up in 1988, it was like the perfect bowl of grits. Not too big, not too small. It was a shorter, lighter version of its older brother, the Glock 17, hitting that perfect balance. You got a full-size capacity of 15 plus 1 rounds of 9mm, plenty of punch for any situation, but it was compact enough for everyday carry. Its ultra-reliable safe-action striker-fired design was a marvel of simplicity, and a famous polymer frame meant it was lightweight too. Now the Glock 19 didn't just get popular, it became a global phenomenon, like the Pokemon of guns. And that was partly because Glock made it affordable and export friendly, kind of like Pokemon. Alright, enough of that. And like always, the real wildfire started when those original patents expired. You could get third-party slides, barrels, optic mounts, fancy skins, and even custom magwells. Folks on Reddit still call it the Toyota Corolla of guns because you can patch it up, mod it, and find parts for it anywhere. So when it came to folks copying the Glock, it was a whole heap of gun makers getting in on the action. You had the Polymer 80 PFC9, letting folks build their own Glock-compatible pistol at home. And then there were custom shops like Faxon with their FX19 Hellfire and Atom Arms with their AA19, both putting out high-end upgraded Glock-style pistols. Even some of the big names like Ruger jumped in with their new Glock-compatible RXM. And don't forget Smith & Wesson SD9 Sigmas, which even led to a lawsuit and later the M&P series, all clearly showing massive influence of that original Glock design. Well, that just about wraps up our journey through the history books of firearms. If you enjoyed this wild ride, go on, hit the like button, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on more good old gun talk.